Hi, this is Jeff Bliss with the Capital Forum, and welcome to the Capital Forum's interview series. Today I have with me Barry Nigro, who is a partner at Fried Frank, but also is a former principal deputy assistant attorney general in the first Trump administration. Welcome, Barry. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. So I want to talk to you a little bit. I think, have a rare perspective. A few of you who served in the Trump administration, you were over at DOJ. I'd like you to compare and contrast what you're seeing now to what you were trying to accomplish back then.
Yeah, so when I was there, I was working with Macon Del Rahim, Assistant Attorney General, and my experience was pretty traditional. It was consistent with what I experienced at the Federal Trade Commission under the Bush administration, working with Tim Muris and then Debbie Majuris.
Right.
And I didn't really see the agencies as all that different at that time. I think now there's, I think from the outside looking in, there's, been a lot of change. And, I think the current administration has tried to sort of focus more on individuals and individual liberty type issues. You've heard that out of the chairman of the FTC and also out of first Gale and now Omid Asefi, the acting assistant attorney general at DOJ. At the same time, they've also been very clear that they're going to be, I'll say, more business friendly in the sense that they're not going to sort of get in the way of deals that don't raise problems. And you kind of see that reflected in things like the return of early termination and also the sort of increased use of settlements, which were on the DOJ side at least almost absent completely during the Biden administration.
You saw so few consent decrees.
I think there was one
under Jonathan Cantor. Absolutely,
there was
it
one.
Was one, right?
That I can recall. Maybe there was another, but. And that was encouraged by a federal judge,
Right.
And now you see more of that. Some of them are more interesting than others, and but there is a clear desire to use settlements as an enforcement tool, in part because they need to better manage their resources, which are down significantly from when I was there.
Right. So they have fewer resources. They seem like they're very open to deal making on so many levels. One, the actual deals themselves, but also two, coming up with a deal such as a consent decree and using more behavioral conditions. I'm seeing more and more. We talk a little bit about, like, I know certainly under you and Macon, you were really very focused on structural remedies, and which was part of an evolution. But I think you guys really explicitly said, we're not crazy about these behavioral conditions. Enough of this.
Yeah, well, you saw, and I think that was in part a reaction to some of the enforcement experience that we were living through with matters like Live Nation, where a lot of resources were being used to enforce that decree years.
It's kind of like DOJ as a regulator, right? A little bit.
Well, years and years after the decree was entered, there were people still spending time on it, and I think Macon thought that wasn't an ideal way for the government to proceed. They wanted to be less regulatory in their approach and more structural. I think there's still a desire to, and a preference for that today, but there's a little more willingness, at least on the merger side, to think about creative ways to resolve competition issues without having to use the resources that are required to litigate, which are substantial. And the head counts at both agencies are substantially below where they were and where they need to be in order to have the kind of enforcement program that would result in a lot of litigation. So at some level, when you're heading up these agencies, you got to be practical, and you got to figure out, how can I maximize the return on investment given the limited resources I have. And sometimes that means settling cases that maybe if you had an unlimited budget, you would litigate.
Right, that makes sense. So the fact that they just don't have, but I want to get back a little bit to the remedies you were talking about, because you need, when you do these behavioral conditions, people to oversee them. So that's going to take up staff. So whether we are starting to see behavioral conditions starting to creep into some of the condition things that are going on right now. You mentioned Live Nation. Back then, that's what established the so-called Varney doctrine under Christine Varney, then Obama's AAG for antitrust, where she was okay with behavioral conditions, and has been steadily moving away. And you guys were a big part of that. Are we going back to that doctrine, do you think?
I don't think so, but I think where there are behavioral aspects to some of these decrees, you're also seeing the use of monitors again to help shift the expense of enforcing these decrees back to the parties.
I see. So these would be independent monitors who are paid by the parties.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
And that every once in a while DOJ will just make sure that check in with
DOJ,
the monitor.
but ultimately, way they're typically set up with the decrees is they report to the court. I mean, because with DOJ, if you have a formal settlement of a complaint, it's overseen by a judge, and it's a court order, and so the monitor would typically work with DOJ, but also work under
Through the
the
court.
supervision of the judge.
All right, so we were going to probably see more of that as just kind of a cost saving, a staff saving resource type of thing, right?
I think so, but I also expect, and I think Amita Sefi has been pretty clear that they're not afraid to litigate when they think it's needed, and I think we will see some cases be litigated at some point. I don't know which ones they are, but I do think there's a genuine desire to do it. But there are also practical constraints, just given the resource issues that I mentioned.
Do you have a sense in terms of the head count at both agencies, how many more people they would need to? I haven't really monitored it in terms of being up to where you guys were.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think I heard or read that they're down about 25%, maybe more.
Okay,
So it's a big number.
Yeah, so
I mean,
it's
they're
not
down.
fine, yeah.
I mean that budgetary reasons have sort of resulted in that. And there's also been people leaving because of Doge and a variety of other reasons. So there's been, I think it's a challenging environment right now for the agencies and the division in particular. So you look at the leadership, and they do have to run the agency. They have to enforce the law,
Right.
and they have to take a practical approach.
Right. Limited resources, where am I going to put this? Make
Yep.
sure that I get the most
Yep.
bang for my buck. That's
Yep.
kind of the old hard decisions that you have to make at that level. Well, let me ask you, what are you advising your clients in this current environment? What do you tell them?
So fundamentally, we're still doing the traditional antitrust analysis, looking and identifying risk, trying to figure out if the risk rise to the level of a problem that might need to be addressed. Can it be addressed? Is there a remedy that would work? And so just what we've always done. And I would never sort of veer away from that, because at the end of the day, that in most cases is what's important. We've had some recent experiences where we've engaged with the staff. We've done a pull and refile. We've worked hard and been able to work through the process the way it's always worked. But there's also a recognition that, and I think clients are asking this because they're reading about it in the newspapers.
Of course, yeah.
Should we hire a lobbyist? Should we try to pull on other levers in order to get our deals done? And if you're a CEO and you're reading about people doing that, you're reading about it being successful, sometimes it's a fair question. And so we get asked that. I would not advise a client that if you have a deal that raises problems, you can just hire somebody and you'll get through the process, because I don't think I've seen it not work, and I'm not a proponent of it, but it's not it's not a silver bullet to get your deal done. I think at the end of the day, you got to address the merits and deal with them on the ground with the staff. Sometimes you end up in gray areas and doing whatever you can to be as persuasive as possible with the front office and taking into account that they need to make judgments about where to invest resources. There may be times or places where you can use other relationships to try to make sure that people are focusing on the things that you think they should be focused on. But ultimately, my experience over the past year has been you're best served by dealing with these matters on the merits and working directly with staff and having candid conversations with them. So.
Okay. Well, Barry, as always, it's been a pleasure. Very exciting and interesting year in antitrust.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'll be checking in with you, I'm sure, next year to
Yep.
get your thoughts on how
Thank
things
you,
have
Jeff.
changed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.